keyword landscape's evolving. Things are getting more competitive. It's not, you can't just roll out of your bed and rank anymore. So what we've realized as an agency is we really got to get our keyword research process dialed in. What worked last year is not going to cut it this year. So um, we've really been iterating. Drew has done an amazing job adding some integrations and automations to our process to further improve that process and look at many different things that could inform what kind of topics we choose and how we prioritize them. We call it keyword opposition and benefit analysis. This was popularized by Todd Malika, really smart SEO. I think he did such a great job with this. He now just lives on a boat in Miami, to my knowledge. So he did a pretty good job of using this process, but we've inherited what he started to essentially look at what is the benefit of a term or a topic against the difficulty, the opposition, essentially. That's what that stands for. So as we dig in here and we get through the different details that we look at in our keyword research process, just worth noting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, all this is generally available and could be pulled in via API?
Yep. Yeah, most of it is automated on our end, and it's grown a lot. Like, it's evolved, I think, beyond what Todd's initial formula was. And so I'm excited to dig in here and kind of go into a little bit more detail about how we come to our winning keyword research process. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, so I'm not ranking very well, but
that's a problem, Drew. Well, let's get that fixed with KOB.
Boom.
So yeah, why don't you lead us off, Drew, as we kind of like walk through our sheet left to right here. What are these core kind of first elements we talk about?
Yeah, I think a quick overview might be helpful. The way that I explain it in our sales process, where we're gathering a list of keywords, we're evaluating those keywords based on keyword difficulty, click volume, or search volume, and pulling in a top ranking post and evaluating that post for links, traffic, and value. That paints a picture of what is it worth to rank for those keywords. And that we further build upon in our analysis. We're going to get into more, but that's kind of the general overview of what the KOB is. So first, of course, you have to do your due diligence on keyword research. Make sure you're identifying, a full funnel strategy. What are your audiences searching for? And where do you think you can kind of like compete? Obviously, this process will help illuminate that. But Ross, what else besides that? Like, what's the keyword research process look like there?
Yeah, and you made me think, Drew, like even before we get here, you don't really skip to this. You don't, I think a weakness would be to just throw an SEO on a new client and think they could do this. We have a month one content strategy discovery phase, understand the buyer persona, the product, the differentiators, and that allows us to do the best job at this. So that's the starting junction. So we'll go pull that initial keyword or list of keywords. We're normally looking for like 50 to 200 to get a real sample size to be able to best prioritize topics, even if we're only going to tackle around 20 of those in 6 months or whatever the timeline is. And our thought process is to lead with a keyword that is the top most relevant keyword to that client that we think they can rank for. And we will pull the difficulty in click volume. And the reason we look at click volume is that you could have a search like, what is link building? And only 30% of the people click that term. So we want to know what is actually the number of clicks people are going to get. This could be impacted further by SGE. So it's a good kind of top level thing to be aware of. And it doesn't super deeply factor into this, as we were talking about prior to this recording, Drew. The reason we have the team and we think about adding that metric into our spreadsheet is that we optimize for this core term in the URL slug of our best practices. And also it allows our team to think through, is this the highest search volume relevant term in this topic? That's the thing we should lean into. So it's kind of a forcing function to pick the right term, even though we don't pull it into the calculations here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to kind of clarify the keyword difficulty for those that don't know, that's a metric from Ahrefs that essentially, like, how hard is it to rank for that keyword? I think they do a combination of like how many backlinks are built to the top 10 or first page result for that keyword, possibly some domain authority domain rating metrics in there as well, but I guess that would kind of be correlative anyway. So if you just look at the links, it's probably indicative of how difficult it is. Okay, cool. And then the relevancy score, that is something that we manually add. We use like a 1 to 3 score. So 3 would be very conversion focused, bottom funnel in nature. 1 less so. It's almost like a funnel stage. Would you say that's correct, Ross?
Yes, yeah, but I would also add it could be just relevant or not. Like for us, email signature, that's probably not going to drive a conversion. But what is content marketing is top funnel, but I would say still a 3. So it would adjust the value to make sure it's more relevant on average for that concept, because some things could be really top funnel or even bottom funnel in nature, but maybe for us it would be kind of more top funnel, like we're doing best social media companies. That could be for us technically might be not be horrible awareness wise for us, that but it'd probably be a 1 as compared to a what is content marketing at a 3.
Right. That makes sense. And then the next metric here is you pull in a top ranking URL for that keyword. Obviously, you want it to be something that is similar to what you would be creating for yourself or your client, not Wikipedia or a homepage, basically. So look for a piece of content. I guess that's a good place to stop and kind of pull on that thread a little bit. Like, what do you think about what type of post to look at and what kind of URL to pull in here?
Essentially, you want to pick what's realistic for you. So that could mean most, I like to say most like you. So that could mean the same thing in some ways. So if you're a budding startup and you're trying to rank for the most competitive content marketing terms, or you go to that search result, you could find another, like we could look and see, are there any other agencies on that search result? That's probably the most realistic outcome as compared to beating HubSpot or SEMrush, who are SaaS terms, more meaty and weighty. So that will probably give us a better perception of what's realistic. And even then, it might be quite difficult. But yeah, that are they essentially homepage? Are they Wikipedia? Different page types. Like sometimes there might be just, and you've really detailed this nicely in your refresh frequency study that we just published, Drew. Is there even blog posts there? Like if there's not other blog posts there, then that's a good, this stage could be when we realize we're not even meant for this term potentially.
Right. And another consideration, just to pull on this a little bit further, something that you kind of alluded to. I look at what is the client's domain rating at the moment that we're running this and kind of make a gut check like decision on where do I think that they could rank on average? Like if all these, you can't assume that they're going to rank number 1 for all of these keywords. So if it's a very low domain rating site, like maybe you pull in the 5th ranking post for each keyword, assuming that over time you're going to be able to achieve that. But you also want to make sure that there's still value to be had at that lower ranking for those keywords and not all of the value is being accrued to the number 1 result.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this is a critical part just to make sure that you're picking the right term. I think so much of good keyword research is deciding when you're not a good fit or what's reasonable, what's too high difficulty for you. That's like, it's easy to just say yes to anything, but I think a lot of our skill set as SEOs should be discerning when it's just not a good fit.
Right. And so we use that URL next to pull in some metrics, just to really paint the picture and evaluate what is it worth to rank for that keyword. So the first one is links. Anything to add there, Ross? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, true. But with our organic link building mindset, I think it is an important piece of the equation of the value, organic link intent of these topics. So while it does connect to keyword difficulty, there are offsets. I don't know what it is exactly about Ahrefs, and other tools might actually do a better version of peeling out page authority as compared to, and page links as compared to domain rating. but sometimes you'll see low search volume terms or relatively mid volume terms that have a good number of links. So this is a good kind of initial signifier of the average link velocity generated by ranking. So if we dig into this, we generally suggest our teams do dig in if we're caring about links primarily as a KPI from the asset. Are there multiple results like us with a lot of links in this range at the page level if we're building it? If that's the case, we might prioritize topics off the KOB score map that will help power initial rankings early. So that's a big reason we pull that metric in.
Yeah. And so just to think about that a little bit further, like ranking for keywords that drive a ton of links can then, and especially if they're relevant to your industry. So if you filter by links, Ross, if you can do that, you'll see statistics keywords be filtered to the top. And we know from experience that those drive a ton of links naturally and organically. And that's going to boost your domain rating because of those links over time. And that's just going to fuel your KOB keywords even further because you're going to be better able to rank as you move down the list in that ranking. Does that make sense?
For sure. And this is probably a good time. I realize we didn't say at the beginning of this pod. Hopefully, this all makes sense for the people listening to this on their podcast player of choice. But highly suggest just quickly bouncing over to YouTube to get the example view of what we're describing. Essentially, a spreadsheet walking through each of these values out loud.
Cool. Next, we pull in page traffic and traffic value. Those are metrics from Ahrefs. To quickly, background on traffic value, it's the equivalent traffic priced in PPC. So what would you need to bid on that traffic via those keywords were you to be paying for it in paid search? And so that's like a directionally, like we use that to estimate our ROI from content. And so we kind of make sure that there is value. This is a metric that is very much factored into the KOB.
This is so critical because we don't want to just look at one keyword. Certain topics have thousands of keywords that you can rank for with one page. So that's why we pull in the entire ranking opportunity from a URL like us ranking high. So that's why this is the baseline of the entire thing as compared to the misguided take of just looking at the search volume of one term and using that to guide what topics you build. So this gives you the accurate kind of landscape of everything that's going on to be able to hopefully make the best topic decisions.
Yeah, it pulls in value that's being accrued from other keywords that post is ranking for it as well.
So the big meat, KOB, essentially keyword opposition to benefit analysis as we described. We essentially will look at the difficulty actually the traffic value divided by the difficulty. So we're adjusting for just how much this is worth. So we lean into traffic value because traffic can be misguided for ability to convert. Like we have an asset on our site, most popular keywords, it does no conversions for us. It's our most traffic page. So Ahrefs traffic value, which looks at what people are bidding on that same traffic, is a helpful guide to understand, can this be monetized? But we do multiply that by the relevancy score as an important adjuster because, as we described earlier, something that one person can monetize may not be the same thing that other people can. We can't monetize email signature. It has a very high traffic value, but we're just not in the vertical where we're ever going to be able to convert to that level. Maybe some affiliate programs, that's feasible potentially, but otherwise not reasonably. So we adjust the score down to make sure we're accounting for that while still giving it some weight, thinking it's still worth doing. And not always is it this perfect. Does it result in the absolute perfect score? If you're a new business, we often guide our team to really sort by difficulty. Of course, consider opportunity as well, but you might want to ignore this because we're not going to rank for content marketing as a 2-word term. So we probably shouldn't even go after that, even though the KOB score might reflect it being quite high.
Yeah, that makes sense. There still is a lot of, can't be fully automated. There's still a lot of nuance and human touch points that need to be made here.
Yeah, and we don't have it in this sheet, Drew, but it might be worth touching on briefly some things that we're looking at adding to this in terms of the SERP features and keyword demand trends. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So one thing, it's pretty clear that in our experience, whenever there's a SERP feature like the image pack or video is present, we want to consider at least creating things to fulfill and rank amongst those, because they can be another place to compete and drive traffic and value in search. So that's something we're thinking about. Including those to like signal to our team that we should be including those elements in our content. Um, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about the keyword demand trends.
Yeah, so that is essentially just thinking about how has the trend for this term changed over time. So link building, I would guess, has gotten a little less popular. It still matters, of course. So if we pulled in via some spark lines that the trend for link building is declining, and then we see something for content marketing going up on a kind of similar opposite trajectory, but the value in the KOB score is equal, we probably want to prioritize the upward trend topic. So it's just further a consideration set on prioritization to hopefully pick the right topic. If we know it's trending down or trending up, we can consider that. And SERP features is a great kind of scope concept that will further revise our score. What are some other things we're pulling in to think about that scope, Drew?
Yeah. One thing is word count, and it's not perfect because it's really just coming from that one piece of content. And I think Ahrefs doesn't calculate that perfectly, but I think on the average, it does make sense to look at what is needed in terms of word count to potentially compete, and that helps us scope these projects. We use a unit structure, but you can kind of think of this as like, depending on what your piece of content is, baseline, like 2x or 4x the amount of time that it'll take to kind of compete. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, 100%. So that's important. Yeah, like not all content is created equal. We've had the warm take, maybe not hot take, that if you're paying for every single blog post at the exact same cost, you're probably losing, because it's not how competitive markets work. Every topic is a little different. So yeah, I briefly kind of like set up that cool data study you just dropped, Drew. It was inspired by this inclusion on this tool. How are we using that?
What this does is for every keyword, it pulls page one of the SERP, and it basically analyzes if Google has dates present in those meta descriptions, or HTML snippets as they're called. If those dates are present, it kind of like takes, in this build, it's like the median date, which is a good like looks at what's the average last updated date of page one for that SERP. And then we compare that to today, the day that we're doing this keyword research, and it essentially gives you a recommendation on how frequently that post should be updated. So like in the one you're highlighting, the last updated date was 87 days ago. So you're going to want to keep that updated quarterly, assuming that kind of stays the same. Like people are still going to be updating and publishing at a rapid clip.
Yeah, and for those listening, we call it refresh frequency, how often you should update content. That's essentially what we're describing. And as Drew described, it's a volatile metric because it's just looking at 10 results. One result could change it. So we generally guide that you should round up on this. But when take a deeper look, obviously stay on top of it. We're working on just active monitoring of search results to make sure this doesn't erode over time. All kind of important things. But this metric specifically can also impact a revised KOB score that essentially will look at, hey, how long is this going to take us? How often we're going to need to update it? And you essentially would just divide the score by that. In this case, we haven't done that directly with refresh frequency, but it's something we bring forward into what we call a roadmap and make sure we're thinking about that in the overall scoping and process. Because, of course, if you're having to update something monthly, or like it's today's mortgage rates, you need to update that every 24 hours. you better account for the resources needed to win on that. Otherwise, you're just going to publish and then it's going to burn out pretty quickly.
In my data study, I do say like, sometimes it is a matter of like having a certain percentage of your budget going towards refreshes, because that's the winning strategy, is just keeping your content up to date. It really depends on the industry. It depends on the target keywords. But yeah, I think that's an important factor. And then the next thing that we do is kind of categorize based on the client, and also funnel stage. Is there anything specific to talk about here, Ross?
Topic authority. I know this is a kind of topic clusters or fun SEO jargon terms people like to say. We care about those, of course. And essentially, a way to address that is you have different product categories. Like HubSpot might have a marketing software. They also have a CRM. They would want to make sure they have significant coverage in sales and significant coverage in marketing, both in breadth and in depth in terms of, are we progressing people in the funnel stages? So we find just these nice little visuals, which if you can't see it, it's just kind of color coded: tofu, mofu, bofu for funnel stage. And just each category is slightly a different shade. We'll make it easy to essentially sort by that and get a very clear, quick visual representation of, do we have enough coverage in this category, or might this be a problem in terms of actually having the relevancy for this term to be able to rank?
Yeah, and I think it's worth kind of having a final sidebar on SGE, because this is something we're thinking about. One being the SERP features. Like if we see that SGE element being automatically generated, or just like the option to generate, I think those are going to be really cool things to get ahead of. And also categorization, because like to your point on topic clusters, I think SGE is going to use your like authority on a given topic as like a knowledge graph to pull data from and then source you. So I think that'll be important.
Yeah, hopefully Hrefs will be able to quickly integrate these things into their API. I'm sure they're already thinking about it in terms of how we think about those things. The click data will be interesting, but I think as long as you're thinking this way already, it's probably directionally indicative of, will it be impacted or not by SGE? Because if click volume is quite high at a search per search basis, it's probably a decent indicator that it's a relatively complex query. It's going to be hard to replace with a very quick robot generated answer, or at least that's the optimistic take.
Cool. Well, yesterday I saw a vanity license plate that was MQLs, and I'm like, I think I'm going to get KOB for my car. What do you think, Ross?
Yeah, and if anyone stops and recognizes us after this pod, like, maybe we'll send some links their way.